האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov and good evening, everyone. We're in the Zera Shimshon on Parsha's Vayetzei. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be doing Os Yud, section number 10. Before we start, we're going to look at one pasuk from the Parsha. Here it comes. This is Bereshis, Perek Chav Tes, pasuk Tes. What's happening here is that Yaakov Avinu has been sent away from home by his parents, both in order to save his life from Esav and also to find a wife in the house of Lavan. And when he gets to the neighborhood, he sees shepherds gathered around a well that has a big rock on top of it. And Yaakov says to the shepherds, go back to work. You can't just sit around here. You've got to water your flocks and get moving. So the pasuk says, again, pasuk tes, Odenu medaber imam, while he was still speaking with them, while Yaakov Avinu was still speaking with the shepherds, V'rochel boa im hatzon, asher le'aviha, and Rachel came with the flocks that belonged to her father, ki ro'ah he, because she was a shepherd. So that's the pasuk. It certainly seems like an innocent enough pasuk, but that's the pasuk that the Zera Shimshon is going to focus on. And as we'll see, he has a lot to tell us about the pasuk and specifically comments in the Medrash Rabbah and the Yalkut Shimoni about the pasuk. So let's get right into Os Yud, section 10. Medrash Rabbah Sham, the Medrash Rabbah there, that means that was previously cited above in the previous piece. And it's also, as you look in the parentheses, you'll see the same comments from the Medrash Rabbah are made in the Yalkut Shimoni. So both of those sources say as follows. They start with the pasuk. V'rochel boi matzon, and Rachel came with the flock. Asher le'aviha, that was to her father. Ki ro'ah he, because she was a shepherd. That's our pasuk. Omer Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, Bo ure'eh ma bein shchenus l'shchenus. Come and see what is the difference between neighborliness and neighborliness, or neighbors and neighbors. In other words, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is going to tell us two situations in Chumash in which the actions of the people in the neighborhood were very different. Lehalon, later on in the Torah, and that's a reference to when Moshe goes to Midian, and he there's an anecdote there about him rescuing Yisro's 7 daughters from the shepherds. So that's what's being referred to. Lahalon, later on in the Torah, Sheva, there are 7 women, the 7 daughters of Yisro, uvikshu haroim lihizdaveg lohen. And the shepherds that were there tried to contend with them, to bother them, or to harm them. We'll see there's another way of understanding the word lehizdaveg, but for right now, we're going to go with the shepherds tried to harass them. Dichsiv, as it's written in the pasuk over there regarding Tzipora and her 6 sisters, it says, Vayavohu haroim vayigarshum. And the shepherds came and chased them away. Of course, Moshe rescued them from the shepherds and then proceeded to draw water for their sheep. And ultimately, he was invited by Yisro to the home and ultimately, of course, married the eldest daughter, Tzipora. However, that's not what the piece is talking about here. So over there, the shepherds were mean. They were not nice to the 7 women. Baram, however, Hacha, here in our story about Rachel, Achas Hayisa, she was one. Rachel came all by herself. In a way, she was very vulnerable. She came by herself to give water to the flock. V'lo nizdaveg lo bria, and no creature, nothing at all, attempted to bother her or harass her. Al shame, and this is based on a pasuk, or it's can be connected to the pasuk from Tehillim. Honem malach Hashem, an angel, a malach of Hashem, camps soviv lireyav, around God's fearing ones, the people who fear God, the God-fearing people, vayichalteim, and he saves them, he rescues them. So the pasuk says that a malach of Hashem camps around God-fearing people and protects them. And so the Medrash says, don't just understand the word saviv in its simple sense of the malach being around the God-fearing people, but rather la misabevim lireyav. The protection of the malach also extends to those who are around God's fearing people. So Rachel here is being protected and is not being harmed because she has entered into the circle, has entered into a connection with Yaakov, and so she is around, included in the protection that the Malach is giving to Yaakov Avinu, and so she too was protected from the Roim. Ad kan Lashono, until here is the language of the Medrash Rabbah and the Yalkut Shimoni. So let's just make sure we understand what's being taught to us here by the Medrash in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. What's being pointed out is that the shepherds in the story of Tzipporah and her sisters were mean and wanted to harass them and tried to chase them away. And if Moshe had not saved them, it could have gotten very ugly. That was one kind of situation. So that's one type of neighborliness, that's the negative type. However, that's being contrasted with what happened with Rachel here, because nothing happened to her. Even though she came by herself, the shepherds didn't bother her. And presumably that was her usual activity, was to bring the sheep by herself. And the other shepherds were neighborly. They were nice to her. So that's what's being contrasted. And it's being connected to a pasuk from Tehillim about how righteous, God-fearing people and those that are in their orbit have a protection, special protection from a malach. And that's what's being taught to us. Now the Zera Shimshon is going to present us with 3 questions. Next paragraph. Kule alma makshin. The whole world asks, Ma inyan zeh la zeh. What is the connection between the 2 stories that the Medrash Rabbah wants to draw lessons from? Meaning the story of Tzipporah and her sisters and the bad shepherds, and the story of Rachel Imenu and the good shepherds. So the first question is, why in the world would anyone try and think that those 2 stories should be compared and contrasted, and that you can learn something significant from that? Dehasam over there, B'Tzipporah, regarding Tzipporah, Hayusonim Yisro, the neighbors and the shepherds hated Tzipporah's father, Mipnei Sheperash Me'avodah Zarah, because Sheparash Me'avodah Zarah, because he had separated himself from Avodah Zarah. Originally, Chazal teaches, Yisro was a expert in Avodah Zarah and the worship of idols, and studied and attempted to fulfill to serve all of the possible idols he could. But then he separated himself from Avodah Zarah. So the neighborhood people were angry and upset with him. Umishum hachi, and because of this, hayu mireyim livanosav. That's why they were attempting to do evil and were mean to Yisro's daughters, Tzipporah and her sisters. That was the problem. Masha ein kain hacha, which is not the case here regarding Rachel and her father Lavan. Shehayu ohavim es Lavan. People in the neighborhood loved Lavan. Lavan was a popular fellow and well-liked in his neighborhood. V'lo hayu lahem la'asos ra livanosav. And there would be no reason for them, the neighbors and the shepherds, to do anything bad to Lavan's daughters, which of course includes Rachel. So that's the first question, and let's pause to make sure we understand it. The Zera Shimshon says everybody in the world who sees this Medrash Rabbah and this Yalkut Shimoni asks the apparently obvious question: why are we, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, trying to compare and contrast the neighbors? There's nothing to compare. There's nothing to learn out from the fact that different things happened in the two cases because the situations are not comparable. In the Yisro situation, everyone in the neighborhood hated him, and that's why they were mean to his daughters. In the Rachel situation, everyone loved her father Lavan, and that's why they had absolutely no thought in their minds of harassing or bothering Rachel. So therefore, we shouldn't be trying to learn something special out from the fact that the first case they were mean to Tzipor and her sisters, and in the second case they were nice to Rachel and didn't bother her. That's obvious if we simply understand the context of the stories. That's question one. Ve'od, and another question, the second question. Haraya shehevi mehapasuk chone malach Hashem. The proof that was brought that Rachel received special protection because of the pasuk in Tehillim about the malach that camps around God-fearing people and those that are connected to them, v'chule, etc. Halogam sham hayashayich tamzeh. That whole reason about protection from a malach could have been applied to Tzipora as well. Shahare Tzipora hayusa asido lios eshes Moshe, because Tzipora was destined to become the wife of Moshe. So just like the malach protected Rachel because she was connected to Yaakov and destined to marry him, so too, that protection from the malach should apply to Tzipora, and that should have protected her and her sisters, presumably from the roim, from the evil shepherds, from the bad shepherds. So the pasuk should have applied in that case as well, because Tzipora was now in Moshe's orbit and destined to marry him. So why did the Rabbi Shimon Gamliel in the Medrash only apply the pasuk to Rachel and not apply it to Tzipora? That was question two. Now we have question three. Ve'od, and another question. Lichora pshat hamedrash kosher reshe l'sefer. Apparently, or at lichora can be translated at first glance, the explanation of the Medrash presents a problem from its first part to its second part. The Techila Omar, because in the beginning, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, Ma bein shechenus l'shechenus. What's the difference between the neighbors in one case who are bad and the neighbors in the other case who are nice? Shenira shehakol bo machmas teva hashechenus, which makes it seem like his question is focused on the fact that in life there are good neighbors and bad neighbors, and that's just the nature of life. That's a reality that if you live in one neighborhood, people might be nice and greet you warmly and kindly, and if you live in a different neighborhood, they might be rude and not welcoming at all. That's just the teva. That's the nature of neighbors and neighborhoods. Va'achar kach, but afterwards, maybe raya mehapasuk chone malach Hashem. But at the end of the piece in the Medrash Rabbah, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel brought in the pasuk about the malach of Hashem protecting the righteous and those that are connected to them. Shenira, which makes it appear shahakol hu b'derech nes. Everything is supernatural and happening through the miracle that Hashem is sending a malach to protect the God-fearing individuals and those that are connected to them. So the third question basically says that the first half of the Medrash doesn't seem to be lined up. It's not aligned, apparently, with the second half, because the first half is seems that it's referring to the natural order of things, and it's talking about, again, contrasting good neighbors and bad neighbors in two different stories in Chumash. But then the second half seems to say, we're not talking about the natural order, we're talking about the supernatural order. We're talking about a malach of Hashem getting involved to offer supernatural protection. In which case, why are two different kinds of contexts and situations being compared to each other, or even being compared and contrasted to each other? That's the third question. V'yesh lomar, and we can say, so the Zera Shimshon is going to begin to bring us sources to develop his responses to the three questions. V'yesh lomar, we can say, De'isa b'shulchan aruch. It states in Shulchan Aruch, Even ha'ezer, in the section of Even ha'ezer, Simon Chaf Beis, section Chaf Beis, De'isha, top of the next column, De'isha achas misyachedes im shnei anoshim kesherim. So that section in Shulchan Aruch is talking about the laws of yichud, of men and women being secluded, being isolated with each other. And it says that one woman is permitted to be alone with two men as long as they are kisherim, as long as they are upstanding, God-fearing men, if they're good people. Imheim ba'ir, if they're in the city, if they're in a urban location. Uvasade, however, in the field, out in the country, ba'inan shlosha. Then for a woman to be able to be allowed to be alone with men, we would require 3 kosher men, 3 good, trustworthy men, and it's not sufficient to just have 2. Aval imheim pritzim, but if the men are immoral, if they're unethical men and immoral licentious men, afilu imasara osir, then even if there are 10 men, put aside if there's 2 or 3, even if there's 10 men, osir, it's forbidden for a woman to be isolated or alone with this group of 10 men if they are pritzim, if they are immoral individuals. Then the halacha continues. Noshim, the Shulchan Aruch continues. Noshim harbe im anoshim harbe. But let's say you don't have one woman, but you have lots of women, a group of women, and they are with many men, a group of men. Ein choshishin liyichud. Then we are not concerned about the problems of yichud, of men and women being alone and being isolated. Those problems and those concerns go away and dissipate when we have a lot of women, a group of women with a group of men. Then there's no isser of yichud in that situation. Ad kan lashono, until here is a quote from the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so that is building block 1. Keep that information in mind. At this point, it's hard to see a clear connection about how that might help us answer the questions, but it's an important set of details from the Halach and Shulchan Aruch that are going to become very relevant soon. V'hayefei toar peiresh. Now we're going to the next paragraph and next building block of information. A commentary called the Yefei Toar explains when it talks about when the Medrash talks about using the word lehizdaveg, that the shepherds wanted to lehizdaveg. So the Yefei Toar says bikshu lehizdaveg lahem, when it says the shepherds wanted to contend with or harass Tzipora and her sisters, lishon znus. We should translate the word lehistaveg not as argue with or harass or bother, but rather they wanted to seduce Tzipora and her sisters. The shepherds came and decided, here's a group of 7 nice girls, and we want to meet them and mingle with them and ultimately seduce them, be with them intimately, sexually. Umishum hachi shapir ka'amar, and because of that piece of information, that's what the shepherds were after, it makes sense that the Medrash says ma bein shechenus l'shchenus. What's the difference between the neighbors in the Tzipora case and the neighbors in the Rachel case? Shahare hasam lo hayu rotzim lasos imohen ra. Because over there in the Tzipora and her sister's case, we now know, according to the commentary of the Yefei Toar, that the shepherds had no intention of harming the girls or harassing them, but rather they wanted to be nice to them, and they didn't want to harm them in any way. She'oz hayinu omrim, had they wanted to harm them, we might have said shehu mipnei sina. It was because of the hatred shehayu lahem im Yisro that they had for Yisro. Ela bikshu lihizdaveg lahen, but now we know they were actually trying to seduce them. Ve'af al pi shehayu shiva, and even though there were 7 women, ve'kaim alon, and we saw how we hold in halach in the Shulchan Aruch in the previous paragraph, nashim harbe iman nashim harbe ein choshishin liyichud, even though according to halacha, we shouldn't be concerned about yichud in a case of a group of women and a group of men, in this case, the shepherds, the group of shepherds and the group of Tzipporah and her sisters, we shouldn't normally be concerned about that. However, sometimes you have men, as we said above, that even though there's a group of them, they can still have licentious thoughts on their minds, as we have in this case with the shepherds. However, the important point here is that we have dealt with the question, one of our 3 questions, which was, how can anyone make any kind of comparison between the 2 cases when they hate, and the shepherds hated Yisro, and that's why they were mean to Tzipporah and her sisters, but the shepherds in the Rachel case loved her father Lavan, and that's why they were nice to Rachel. We've gotten rid of that entire question because, according to the Yefei Toar, the shepherds actually were not trying to harass and be mean to them, so there's no issue of their hatred of Yisro. That's not relevant here. They might have hated him, but in this case, they put that aside. They put their hatred of Yisro aside in order to play nice and make nice with Tzipporah and her sisters. And so therefore, we've dealt with that question. Now, let's continue. Baram, however, hacha, here in the case of Rachel, achas bilvad hayusa, there was only one young lady. V'lama Lavan hayusholcha levada. And why would Lavan have consented to send her, Rachel, by herself? That doesn't seem like something that a good father would do. Elavadai, but definitely shahatamhu, the reason must be mipnei shehayu anoshim kisherim. It must be that the shepherds in Lavan's neighborhood were good and honorable men. V'hoyu rabim, and there were many of them. So even though we don't necessarily think of Lavan as a close follower of the halachas in the Shulchan Aruch, the Zera Shimshon is saying, even if we want to assume that Lavan was simply a protective father, and we have no reason not to assume that, there's good evidence in the Torah that he was very protective over his daughters. So even if we just want to assume that, that leads us to believe that that if he sent her on her own, if he sent Rachel on her own, the shepherds in the area must have been good, trustworthy men. And because there was a group of them, Lavan felt it would be okay to send Rachel by herself. She'oz isha achas levada yechola lihisyached imoim. In a case like that, an individual woman can be alone with the men, as we saw that even out in the field, and this was certainly a case of basadev out in the field. We saw in the Shulchan Aruch that a woman can be alone with 3 men if they are kasherim, if they are good, honorable men. And so the Zera Shimshon saying that must be the case here regarding Rachel. This leads him to pose another question, which will appear like a digression, but will come back and be connected. Next paragraph. V'loma nizdamnu lelavan shchenim kol kach tovim. What did Lavan do to deserve such good neighbors? Lavan, who we call Lavan Harasha, Lavan is a pretty bad guy according to the teachings of Chazal, and certainly we see evidence of it in the Chumash itself, including our Parsha. So, what in the world did he do to deserve such good, honorable neighbors? V'halohu hayurasha, he was a wicked individual. V'hayolo limtzo av shechenim rishayim, and he should have found bad neighbors who were also wicked. Why would a wicked guy like Lavan have found himself and have stayed in the neighborhood of good people? Shehazar zir holech eitzel orev. This is a quote, as you can see, from a Gemara in Baba Kama, where one of the Tanoim states that a zarzir, a starling, goes after a raven, meaning he notices, is observing that starling birds are often found around ravens. And he says, in the Gemara, he says the reason for that is because they're both non-kosher birds, and that's why they're attracted to each other. A kosher bird, apparently, he posits, would not want to hang around with a big raven who's a non-kosher bird, but a zarzir, who he identifies as a not kosher bird, commonly is found with a raven because it's attracted to its type, its min, its species. They're both non-kosher, and so they enjoy being with each other. So to Lavan, the Russia should have never found himself in the neighborhood of nice, good, honorable people, but rather should have found himself in a pretty tough, bad neighborhood. The Teretz and the Medrash answers that question, even though we never saw that question openly asked in the Medrash. Zera Shimshon says that was a thought, that question was in the mind of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel in the Medrash Rabbah, and he answers it by saying, Chonem Malach Hashem Saviv Lireav. The Malach of Hashem camps around those who are God-fearing, La Misabavim Lireav, to those who surround God-fearing people. So the Medrash is actually dealing with this question about Lavan as well, and it's telling us that good people receive protection from the Malach of Hashem, even if they're just, bad people can receive the protection of a Malach of Hashem, even if they're just connected and in the circle of a good person. And as we see in the Torah itself, Lavan received tremendous benefits from having Yaakov, as Lavan himself recognized, from having Yaakov Avinu be a part of his household. So Lavan's merit, you might say, or Lavan's privilege of having good neighbors came to him because of this pasuk in Tehillim and his destined connection with Yaakov Avinu. Klomar, and now we're going to see, now the Zera Shimshon is going to tell us, go deeper into this idea. Sheha'olam omrim, because the world says, Shtei bonos yesh leLavan, u'shnei bonim yesh leRivka. Everyone realized that Lavan had two daughters, and Rivka, Lavan's sister, had two sons. Everyone knew the story. People knew the family situation. And people said, Hagedola leGadol, the oldest sister, namely Leah, should go to the oldest son, namely Esav. V'haketana lakotan, and the younger sister of, the younger daughter, the oldest daughter, the elder daughter of Lavan, should go to the elder son of Rivka. So that puts Leah and Esav together. V'haketana lakotan, and the youngest child of Lavan, namely Rachel, should go to the youngest child of Rivka, and that would be Yaakov. So people were already planning, not just the shadchanim of ancient times, but everybody assumed that Esav and Leah would end up together, God forbid, and that Yaakov and Rachel would end up together. V'im kain, and if so, hayu yodim sherachel hayusa asida lihios eshes Yaakov. Since people assume that, it means that they knew that Rachel was destined to become the wife of Yaakov. V'Rachel atzma hayusa svura kach, and Rachel herself thought so. V'hoil shekol ha'olim yodim sheYaakov hayitzadik, and since the whole world knew that Yaakov Avinu was a righteous person, v'Rachel tihiyah ishto, and Rachel would become his wife, mishum hachi chonem malach. That's why we can apply the pasuk of the malach's protection, la misabavim lireav, to those that are in the circle of God-fearing people. So since everyone in the neighborhood, and even farther afield, even around the world, everyone knew or assumed that Rachel was going to marry Yaakov Avinu. Therefore, everyone was nice to her and kind to her because of her connection, her destined connection to marry Yaakov Avinu. Continuing the next paragraph, V'daye kra lomar, and the pasuk was careful to say the words ki ro'ahi. You might recall at the end of the pasuk it said, because she was a shepherd. And the Zera Shimshon is saying, you might think those words are superfluous. They're not needed. If Rachel is bringing the flock to the well to give them water, obviously she must be the person taking care of the flock and leading the flock, which means she's the shepherd. So why did the Torah have to say ki ro'ahi? Because she's a shepherd or a shepherdess. And the Zera Shimshon is going to explain why the Torah went out of its way, so to speak, to tell us that fact. Because when it says she is a shepherd, osi lemay Leah, that word is coming to exclude Leah. Is coming to tell us that only Rachel took care of her father's flocks, not Leah. Shahagam shahayasa gedola yoser mi Rachel, even though Leah was older than Rachel, and therefore you would think she would be the one who would be entrusted with taking care of the flock. No, that's not what happened. Hoyel shahayasa soveres shemazolo ra. Since Leah thought that her destiny and her fortune was bad, she was destined to marry Esav, which means she assumed that she would have a bad life, was destined to have a very negative life. Sha'asido liyos bechelko shel Esav, that she in the future would be in the possession of Esav, or in the family, in the chelik, in the portion of Esav. Mishum hachi lo rotzta laleches liros. Because of that, she did not want to go out and shepherd the sheep, which is what she should have been doing as the older sister. Because perhaps she thought something bad would happen to her, since she assumed that her life was going to be full of misery, full of suffering, full of bad fortune. Masha ein kain Rachel, but this was not the case with Rachel. Because she knew that her destiny and her fortune was good. She was destined to be the wife of the great tzaddik Yaakov Avinu. Botcha al atzma. And so she trusted herself. She had confidence in herself to go out and take care of the flock by herself, alone. And so Rachel and Leah had very different outlooks about their futures and about their situations. V'zehu chone malach Hashem, and this is connected to the pasuk in Tehillim about the special protection that Rachel received, specifically because she was willing and determined to go out into the world and take care of the flock, which led her earlier to a connection with Yaakov Avinu than Leah's connection, which only came later. Last paragraph. Uma shehikshu. And the other question that was asked, Sha'af tzipora hayusor uyalios eshes Moshe, one of the questions, I believe it was the third one, which was, Tzipora should also have received the special protection from the Malach because she was destined to become the wife of Moshe, in which case, why did the shepherds, why wasn't she totally protected from the shepherds? Either from harassment or from seduction. Why did the shepherds try and do anything to her? Evsher nami lomar, we can possibly say, shemashe bikshu haroim lihistaveg lohen, when the shepherds wanted to come and seduce the women, hainu lishar sheish shehayu ima. That's not, and doesn't include Tzipora. That means the other six girls, her six sisters, the shepherds tried to seduce, but not Tzipora herself. So the Zera Shimshon says that's one way of answering the question, because it doesn't say specifically in the pasuk that the shepherds came and started up with Tzipora in any way. However you understand the term lehizdaveg, or started up, that's not what happened. Perhaps we can say that was regarding her sisters, but not her. The ode, and there's another answer entirely. Shiny Tzipora. Tzipora's situation was different. Shelo hayanoda, because it was not known shetihiya eshes Moshe, that she would become the wife of Moshe. since people didn't know that she was destined to become the wife of Moshe, then the mechanism of the protection that she would receive didn't apply, because according to this second answer, it only applied when people were aware that the person was going to had a destiny, was destined to be connected to a righteous individual. People knew, as Zera Shimshon taught us previously, people knew and assumed that Rachel was going to marry Yaakov, and that would help explain why the shepherds were kind to her and didn't bother her in any way. However, no one knew that Zipporah was destined to marry Moshe Rabbeinu. That's not someone that that's not something that anyone could have predicted. And so therefore, the type of protection that could have been extended to Zipporah didn't start at that point. It only started later, once it became known that she was going to marry Moshe, and certainly after she in fact married Moshe. Yasher Kof to joining us this week in the Zera Shimshon, and we look forward to learning Zera Shimshon together on next week's Parsha.